What's up, everybody? It's communism time. Man, I can't see anything with these on. You guys remember when I debated that libertarian and he wore sunglasses the entire time? I don't know how he saw anything. Maybe that's why he was a libertarian. Maybe he just can't see all day, so he can't read anything. I'm going to take these off. I wish I had my blue light glasses, but I can't find them. Either way, what's up, everybody? Hello, Comrade Jacob. Hello, Cobalt Steel, who is here now. Hello, Leo. How are you? What is this? Is Daft Punk back? Yes. One more time. What are you wearing over your visual sensors? Sunglasses. But I can handle the brightness for now because I can't see anything with those sunglasses on. We have a lot of interesting stories to cover today. Obviously, going to continue to focus on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Recently, there was a ceasefire, and even though Israeli attacks have continued in many respects, they've decreased so that there could be a prisoner exchange. And so some of the prisoners taken by the Hamas resistance forces could be exchanged for some of the prisoners held without trial in Israeli detention for years and years and years, which isn't that interesting that when Israel holds a bunch of people behind bars, a bunch of Palestinians behind bars without charges or trial, the media doesn't make a peep about it. And when they do, they call them prisoners, not hostages, which is what they actually are. But when Hamas takes prisoners, and with the intention of exchanging them for Palestinian prisoners, the media freaks out and says, look at them taking these hostages, these terrorists taking these hostages. But when Israel does it, they're not terrorists. Those aren't hostages. Those are prisoners. So we'll talk about that and the ongoing situation. But first of all, I found this really interesting video from this guy named Syed Taslim. I'm probably butchering his name, unfortunately, because he's a very smart person. But it's a video about how Israeli settlers or Israeli citizens justify the occupation, because they're living the occupation every day, right? They're literally moving into Palestinian homes or homes that formerly belonged to Palestinian Arabs, or they're demolishing Palestinian Arab homes and then building homes that Israelis move into. So they're literally occupying the land. And the question is, how do they justify this to themselves? You know, what ideology do they have that allows them to see this situation as just and see this situation as right and see the dehumanization and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians and the theft of their ancestral homeland as a just thing? This little 6-minute clip here kind of goes into the details of that. So I'll put it on 1.25 speed and we'll watch it.
Society had surrounded itself with shields, with walls, not only physical walls, but also mental walls. I don't want to get into it because it's another lecture, but I'll just give the 3 principles which enable us Israelis to live so easily with this brutal reality. Most of the Israelis, if not all of them, deeply believe that we are the chosen people. And if we are the chosen people, we have the right to do whatever we want. B.
So that's number one. Many Israelis believe they're the chosen people. Israel is the land that's been given to them by God. They have a religious right to this land. So therefore, they're justified in doing whatever they want, occupying Palestinian territory, forcing Palestinians out of their homes, demolishing their homes, enforcing a political system of apartheid that systematically deprives Palestinian Arabs of their civil liberties, their political and civil rights. Right? They can justify this because they truly believe that this land has been given to them by God and they have a religious right to this land, which is why, you know, the claims that Israel has a religious or biblical right to this land and therefore they should be able to take it, those should have no standing, you know, under international law or from a legal position. It's a purely religious and nationalistic extremist ideology to hold.
There were more brutal occupations in history. There were even longer occupations in history, even though the Israeli occupation gets to quite a nice record. But there was never in history an occupation in which the occupier presented himself as the victim. Not only the victim, the only victim around. This also enabled any Israeli to live in peace because we are the victims.
So true. So true. They always portray themselves as the victims, and that's why this book by Norman Finkelstein, Image and Reality of the Israel-Palestine Conflict, is so interesting. Because in every case of Israeli expulsion or Israeli conquering of Palestinian villages, they portray themselves as the victims. They say the Palestinians attacked us first, so we had to defend ourselves. And by the time we were done defending ourselves, all the Palestinians had fled their homes. And Israel had seized all the land and all the Arabs had fled. We didn't mean for them to flee. We didn't intentionally conquer their land and force them out of their homes. They attacked us, we defended ourselves, and we tripped and fell and stole all their land and all their houses. They always portray themselves as the victims, and this helps them get the support of great Western powers because, as Finkelstein also points out in this book, Israel has always been dependent on having the support of a great power, of a great Western imperialist power, which now is mostly the United States, as well as countries like Australia and Britain who are selling them weapons and supporting them politically in certain cases. But mostly it's the United States giving them $4 billion a year. And the Zionist leadership has written this into their strategy. They've said that we need to keep the support of a great power if we want to continue with our project of expanding and establishing a Jewish state. So because America is majority white, you know, and America has been a white supremacist country at points in its history, Israel is able to portray itself as the victim because they're surrounded by all of these Arabs, right? And Israel is definitely the whitest country in the entire region. And they're able to use Islamophobic and xenophobic propaganda and xenophobic tendencies in Americans to get them to support Israel. Like compare it, for example, the propaganda point that the IDF and the Israeli government has really begun using lately, comparing Hamas to ISIS, right? Even though the U.S. created ISIS with their invasion of Iraq, you know, there are a lot of Americans who associate the Muslim religion and all Muslim political groups with ISIS just out of sheer ignorance and because that's what the propaganda has told us. So that gives Israel an easy propaganda talking point. They say Hamas equals ISIS. It's not true. They have a completely different ideology. Hamas formed in resistance to the Israeli occupation. They're not a jihadist extremist group in the same way that ISIS is, but it doesn't matter. The Israeli propagandists just say ISIS equals Hamas, and that's enough to convince a lot of xenophobic Americans to hate Palestine and hate Hamas, because we've been conditioned for the last 20 plus years to think that Muslim people are evil terrorists and we need to wage a war on terror. And Israel is our only ally in the Middle East, and they're helping us wage this war on terror. So even though Israel's an occupying power that is committing an ethnic cleansing and a genocide against the Palestinians, who have far, far, far inferior weaponry to the Israelis, who are being sold or gifted basically high-powered weaponry by the Americans and by American weapons manufacturers. Even though Israel is clearly the occupier and the more militarily well-equipped power in that conflict, they're still able to portray themselves as the victims, because they say, oh, look at us. We're surrounded by all these Arab countries, these evil Arabs who are basically ISIS. You know, aren't we the victims? No, you're not the victims. You're continually expanding because you're given $4 billion of high-tech weaponry from the United States every year that you're using to commit a genocide against Palestinian Arabs who are fighting back with literally jerry-rigged fireworks.
The other day, Professor Falk spoke about this dual strategy of Israel of being a victim on one hand and manipulating the other on the other hand. After what happened in Paris and in Copenhagen with the terror attacks, Benjamin Netanyahu came with the notion all the Jews must come to Israel. It's the safest place for the Jews in the world. It's a shelter for the Jews in the world, which is wrong because Israel is today the most dangerous place on earth for Jews. But let's put it aside. It was only 24 hours later when he said Israel is an existential threat under the Iranian bomb. And I asked myself, how can you dare call Jews to come and to join this suicidal project when the Iranians are going to bomb us?
That's so funny. Israel's the best. Israel's the strongest. Israel creates a safe place for Jewish people, but Iran is going to wipe us out with a nuke at any second. So Israeli propagandists simultaneously think Israel's the safest place for Jewish people and the most dangerous place on earth for Jewish people because of the scary, evil Arabs and scary, evil Iranians.
But in Israel, everything goes, and both declarations were accepted as the only truth. And here I get to the third set of values which enable us Israelis to live in peace with the occupation. And this is maybe the most crucial one and the worst one. We say victimization, we say it's chosen people. When I say victimization, it goes without saying we have to mention the Holocaust and the unforgettable Mrs. Golda Meir that the American jury had exported to Israel. She said once, this unforgettable woman, that after the Holocaust, the Jews have the right to do whatever they want. But the third set of values is the most dangerous one.
And since I've been talking about Norman Finkelstein, he's got a book that I haven't read yet called The Holocaust Industry, where he talks about how the Holocaust was used to justify Israel's crimes and used to justify the genocide of the Palestinians by Zionists. So the genocide of one people, the ethnic cleansing of one people, the Jewish people in Europe, helped fuel and spur on the genocide of another people, the genocide of the Palestinians, because these Zionists, these extreme Jewish nationalists, started saying we need a safe place. Jews need our own state. And then, you know, where do you found that state? Oh, we found it on top of Palestine. And then the question is, well, what do you do with the people who are already there? And the answer has, in reality, in practice, always been expulsion and the conquering and killing of the Palestinian people.
This is the systematic dehumanization of the Palestinians, which enable us Israelis to live in peace with everything. Because if they are not human beings like us, then there is not really a question of human rights. And if you scratch under the skin of almost every Israeli, you will find it there. Almost no one will treat the Palestinians as equal human beings like us. I once wrote that we treat the Palestinians like animals, and I got so many protest letters from animal rights organizations, rightly so.
That's true. I have a anecdotal story, but personal experience. One of the things that convinced me to be pro-Palestine was talking to Israeli citizens or Zionists and actual members of the IDF. So when I first started making videos in favor of Palestine on TikTok, there were, of course, Zionists saying this isn't true, these are lies, blah, blah, blah. And one of them, who, you know, admittedly was very nice to me, but had some very heinous political ideas, said, come have a Zoom chat with me and my friends, and we'll talk to you about Israel and tell you where we think you're wrong. And she was someone living in New York who wanted to move to Israel using her birthright and join the IDF, the Israeli Occupation Forces, or Israeli Defense Forces, as they call themselves. And she had me talk to two of her friends who were in Israel with the IDF. And when the question of the Palestinian Arabs came up, it was impossible to get them to see the Palestinian Arabs like humans, right? They just were constantly saying, well, they're trying to kill us. They're trying to kill my family. The Arabs are trying to kill me, playing the victim, as this guy said. And the longer we talked, the more they basically talked about the Palestinian Arabs like they were subhuman. And like they needed to be exterminated. So that was an eye-opening experience for me. It had the opposite effect that they intended of making me more pro-Israel. It was honestly, what it reminded me of at the time was talking to Americans who were in favor of the Iraq War, where no matter how many facts you brought up and no matter how many facts you presented to show that the Iraq War was bad and it was based on lies, they would reject that and say, well, yeah, but we got to go get the terrorists. Right? These people are terrorists, so we got to go get them. That's what the Zionists reminded me of. No matter how many facts about the murder and dispossession of the Palestinians that I brought up, they just basically would say, well, they're terrorists. Well, they're trying to kill my family, so it's justified.
But by the end of the day, how many Israelis did ever try for a moment to put themselves in the place of the Palestinians for a moment, for one day? And I want to give you two examples which will demonstrate it. Many years ago, I interviewed then candidate for Prime Minister, Ehud Barak. And I asked him a question which I try to ask in any occasion. Mr. Barak, what would have happened if you would have been born Palestinian? And Barak gave me then the only honest answer he could give me. He said I would have joined a terror organization. What else would have he done? Would he become a poet? He doesn't know to write poems. Would he become a pianist? He's quite a bad pianist, and I doubt if he would have become a collaborator because he is a fighter. And it became a scandal because...
That's what I told Destiny too. That's what I told Destiny when he was asking me about Hamas. I was like, well, I'm an American, right? So I want my government to stop giving Israel $4 billion a year to commit their crimes against the Palestinians, right? That is my number one goal. My government is right now giving Israel 2 thumbs up, the Biden administration is, and offering them even more weapons and even more funding, and so green lighting everything they're doing to the Palestinians, right? And I want to bring an end to that as an American. That's my government. But if I was born into Gaza, if I was born into an open air prison, if I was born into a concentration camp, I think I probably would join one of the militant organizations. What else would you do? You have no future, right? The unemployment rate in Gaza and the West Bank is insane, through the roof, like well over 50%. You know, the education rates are tiny. There's no drinkable water there. They're economically blockaded in. They're a people with no future. What would you do? What would you do if that is the situation you were born into? If you were born into a concentration camp?
Because how can you dare to put Ehud Barak to think what would have happened if he would have become a Palestinian? And the second incident, briefly, second Intifada, the city of...
And if you missed what he was saying there, he said the former prime minister of Israel said that. He said if he was born into Gaza, if he was born into the same situation that so many Palestinians are, he would probably join one of the militant organizations.
Jenin, the most closed city in the West Bank, real total siege. I go out from Jenin, I come to the checkpoint, a Palestinian ambulance is parking there with the red lights. I stand after him, no cars can get out of Jenin in those days, no cars can get in, and I wait. The soldiers are playing backgammon in the tent. Usually I know myself, it's better that I don't get into a confrontation with the soldiers because it always ends up very badly. So I stayed in the car, but after 40 minutes I couldn't take it, and I went out from the car. I went first to the Palestinian ambulance driver and I asked him, what's going on? He told me that's the routine. They let me wait 1 hour until they come and check the ambulance. And I couldn't take it anymore. And I went to the soldiers.
So that gives you an idea of what apartheid entails, right? I don't think people always fully grasp what that means. Like, yes, Palestinians are deprived of political rights, but they're also forced to go through these like military checkpoints constantly where they're patted down and searched and can be arrested for no reason. And, you know, over a quarter, and we'll cover this later, over a quarter of Israel's Palestinian prisoners are held without trial or without a charge. So you can just be arrested randomly. And stuff like this, where they have an ambulance where people are laying there needing medical attention, And the Israeli apartheid forces make them wait an hour for the ambulance to be searched for weapons or whatever, because remember, they think all the Palestinians are terrorists. And meanwhile, this person or people are laying in the ambulance, not getting the medical care that they desperately need. So these are the kind of things that the apartheid entails, that dehumanize the Palestinians and cause. This is why the average life expectancy of Palestinians in this region is so much lower. Right? They can't get access to medical care or water or food. It's an apartheid. Right? Think about like separate but equal in the United States. Think about segregation in the United States just on steroids.
Became a confrontation, but the question that I asked them, which really brought them to direct their weapons toward me, was one: what would have happened if your father would have been lying in this ambulance? This freaked them out. They lost control. How can I dare to compare between their father and the Palestinian in the ambulance? And this set of beliefs that they are not human beings like us enable us Israelis to live in so much peace with those crimes, ongoing crime for so many years, with losing any kind of humanity, values. I heard today people talk about Jewish values. I must be frank with you, I don't know what are Jewish values. I know what are universal values. Let's not get into it, really.
So, the answer to the question, how Israelis live so easily with occupation? Basically dehumanization. They basically don't see Palestinian Arabs or Arabs in general as being humans. They see them as terrorists. They see themselves as the victims, even though they are the ones who have committed the vast majority of the massacres in Palestine and who have seized more and more and more and more Palestinian land, who are building new settlements in the West Bank on Palestinian land and demolishing more Palestinian homes to this day. People who are trying to commit a genocide in Gaza and push 2 million people into the Sinai desert. Despite that, Israelis still see themselves as the victims, and they see the Palestinians as terrorists for fighting back. And with that ideology, along with the ideology of seeing themselves as God's chosen people, they are able to justify the most horrific crimes, the most horrific terror attacks, the detention and torture of Palestinians without charge and without trial, and the everyday enforcing of an apartheid that deprives Palestinian Arabs of civil rights, basic political rights, and also economic rights or economic benefits like healthcare, clean water, and food. So very interesting. Shout out. This is Gideon Levy, I guess. It was uploaded by Syed Taslim. Looks like it was at a conference called the Israel Lobby. Is it good for the U.S.? Is it good for Israel? At first, when I watched this, I thought it was something hosted by the Israel Lobby. So I was preparing myself for some garbage propaganda. And then I was pleasantly surprised when it was that amazing discussion there, that amazing talk. So shout out to that guy. It's been so long since I've seen Eddie on my TikTok, FYP. Almost forgot he exists, but I'm glad to see I can see his vids again. You bet. I took a break from TikTok after having 6 or 7 accounts banned. It was just getting like, I would build these accounts up and get excited about them. Like, oh, we're getting all these new followers and all these new viewers. And then they would get banned. They get ripped out from under me. And most of the content would be gone unless I, uploaded it to YouTube. So for a while, I was like, screw this. I'm just going to do the YouTube. But then recently I got back into the TikToks and we've been gaining a ton of followers and viewers. And I think I've learned how to use, not accidentally infringe on any of TikTok's community guidelines, knock on wood. But I'm hoping I can avoid another ban. But the TikToks have been pushing a lot of people to our YouTube, to our long form content, and to our website with all of our written content, and to our books. The Midwestern Marx Publishing Press, which is what what I want to do, because I want to build long-term, want to help people develop into long-term fighters for socialism, long-term fighters against imperialism and capitalism, which I feel like is what our YouTube content and our written content can do. And TikTok is more like a recruitment tool. It's like a net to catch you all and bring you in so you can become stronger and become better at waging the class struggle and fighting against imperialism. So I've been throwing myself into TikTok, but now I've been a lot better about also uploading the TikTok videos to Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So I'm backing up all of the best TikTok content that we're doing. And it's also helping us grow our following on Instagram and X. So make sure to follow us at Marx Midwest on Twitter and on X, or Twitter/X, not Twitter and X. Here. Marx Midwest. You can also follow my personal, Ed B. Liger Smith. I think if you search Liger, it'll probably come up right here. Follow that. Then follow the Midwestern Marx Instagram too. That one's just Midwestern Marx. We've gained like 30,000 followers on there recently. And yeah, then I have 2 TikTok accounts. So hopefully if one of them gets banned, I'll still have the other one. But yeah, we're growing. Midwestern Marx is growing like crazy. And the Jubilee episode I did hasn't even come out yet. I went to LA and I filmed one of these for Jubilee, an account with 8.4 million subscribers, assuming there's a chance that they don't upload their videos that they film, I guess. But I think it went really well. I assume they're going to upload the video that we filmed. So that'll bring a whole bunch of new people into Midwestern Marx since they have 8.4 million subscribers, and I feel like I performed well. So yeah, lots of stuff to be excited about, lots of growth for Midwestern Marx on the horizon. If you want to help support us, just be sure to like and share the stream. Interacting in the chat is really helpful because that helps boost us in the algorithm. Liking and sharing and commenting on any of our content is much appreciated. And then if you really want to help, patreon.com/MidwesternMarx. You can support financially. $1 will get you access to the Midwestern Marx Discord for life. We'll never kick you out, even if you stop giving to us via Patreon. And if you're a $10 Patreon supporter or YouTube member, YouTube members also get Discord access. But if you're a $10, you get Carlos's new book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, on ebook. So very good deal there, if you ask me. Thanks to all of our current Patreon supporters and YouTube members, such as K Grenade, everybody's favorite FedEx worker. Sorry to interrupt, but I got to tell you something, Eddie. On Sunday, I've got a date with a girl who organized a tenants union and owns Capital Part 1. Let's go. Round of applause for K Grenade. That deserves 2 rounds of applause, to be honest with you. This sounds like an amazing girl. It sounds like a keeper. You guys can study Marxism together. You can organize together. That's badass. Don't mess it up. Just kidding. No pressure. Just be yourself. It'll go great. Thank you so much for the $5, but be sure to save your money for the date because, you want to pick up the check. You got to be chivalrous. But appreciate you, Cade Grenade. I hope it goes well. Sending you all the positive vibes and all the charisma. You got this. That's awesome. Huge Stalin's mustache. Absolutely. That is huge for Cade. Cade, congrats. I'm so jealous. We all will all find love like Cade Grenade someday. Just try to be happy for him now. Try not to be jealous. And one day we'll all meet a girl who organizes tenants unions and reads Capital. What was Jubilee about? I don't know if I'm able to say. I don't think I'm able to say. They made me sign a non-disclosure agreement, but I mean, if you know me and if you know Jubilee, you can kind of guess like what the gist of the show was. But it was we gathered 100 people in a room, and they're all trying to decide which one's gay. Just kidding. That is like the kind of content Jubilee does, though. You'll see it soon. They said it should be out before Christmas, so I hope that's true. All right, let's go to our next story, which is Jewish comedian Adam Friedland, who does a podcast called The Adam Friedland Show, I believe. Pretty interesting podcast. I haven't listened to it a ton, but when I have, it's been pretty interesting. But he recently talked about Israel-Palestine and his background being raised as a Jewish person and being raised as a Zionist and being told his whole life that we have to support Israel so the Holocaust doesn't happen again. And then he had a change of heart, a change of worldview after visiting Israel and after seeing the occupied West Bank territories. So let's watch this video here. I did a little short video about it where I edited in some graphics to try and help explain to people what Adam Friedland's talking about. So we'll watch that version. But this was originally posted by Glenn Greenwald. Jewish comedian Adam Friedland had a really interesting conversation on his show recently where he talked about being raised as a Zionist and told to always support Israel. However, he changed his mind after visiting Israel and seeing the conditions of the Palestinians living under Israeli occupation.
No, but we went to the settlements, and I was like, to that point, I was a fucking Zionist. I was there right after they disengaged from Gaza, right after they cleared out Gush Katif and like Sharon left. And they took us to the West Bank. Like the last month I was there, and I realized that I was like, oh, this is the wrong side of history. And I saw, like, you look down at the Arab village that was underneath where this fucking settlement was, and you see how these people are living under constant surveillance and they're being fucking demeaned and dehumanized. And then you see these fucking guys like building these tract houses like they live in fucking Orange County. You know, in the middle of like this political reality, which is brutal and fucking like inhumane. And I lost it. I lost it then. And I went back and I told my parents, and we got in big arguments. I was like, you know, this is what we were told was important, was to support fucking Israel so the Holocaust doesn't happen again. That's what we were told. And that's what my parents were told when they were growing up. And they knew survivors, you know, and it freaked them out. And I understand why there's like this like narrative in the Jewish community, but like that doesn't make Jews more safe. You know, it's a failure of a project, and then now we're seeing like this fucking bloody reality. And
yeah, but the response is crazy because
the response is insane.
It's like the idea, like
seeing Joe Biden saying he doesn't believe the death tolls, that really broke me.
Wow, that is an incredible story. Solidarity with him for being honest. And I want to point out, not only did Joe Biden deny the Gaza death tolls, but his press secretary said that people calling for peace are disgraceful and repugnant. This is one of the most disgusting administrations of all time. Don't be on the wrong side of history. Support Palestine. I forgot to unmute myself there, but all I said was that the Holocaust Industry, that book that popped up on screen, is a Finkelstein book about how the Holocaust is used by Zionist propagandists to do apologetics for Israeli crimes and justify Zionism and Zionist expansion. But that story is so interesting, and this isn't a political scientist, right? It's a comedian telling his personal story and his personal experience. This is what Zionist propagandists hate more than anything, right? This is why Israel is losing the propaganda war, because they do these creepy birthright trips, as someone said earlier, birthright visits, where they bring Jewish people to Israel basically like it's a college recruitment visit. Say, look at all the wonderful stuff we're doing, and they tailor it to push people towards supporting Zionism and supporting Israel. But this guy was smart enough to see that the Palestinians in the West Bank and the occupied territories are essentially living in a ghetto. They're living in complete economic degradation with huge levels of unemployment, and their shelter is falling apart and low access to water and food, completely deprived of political rights, deprived of healthcare, like in the last video that we watched, like that explained. He saw that and he realized, oh, Israel's on the wrong side of history. Israel is the occupying, colonizing power here. Israel is the government enforcing an apartheid and systematically depriving Palestinian Arabs of economic opportunities and basic civil rights. And he changed sides. His trip to Israel had the opposite effect that Israel wanted it to have. He changed his mind. And then he went on his podcast that thousands and thousands of people watch, and he told his story. And his parents, right? His parents were Zionists. His parents supported Israel. And his trip to Israel convinced him the other way around, which, I believe this is happening all across America, right? There are all sorts of people who have been told their whole lives that they have to support Israel. And now the younger generation is looking into it and saying, well, hold on. This is an apartheid state. This isn't something that I want to support, nor is this something that is helping Jewish people and protecting Jewish people. The Israeli propagandists do this double think where they say, we need Israel to protect Jewish people, but also they portray themselves as the constant victims. And they're always saying Iran's going to nuke us, Syria's going to bomb us, Hezbollah and Hamas are going to destroy us. So really it puts a target on the back of a lot of Jewish people. It's one of the most dangerous places on earth for Jewish people to live. So a lot of people are seeing through the Zionist propaganda and they're turning against Israel. This is one example of someone in a Jewish family. I myself am another example. I'm not Jewish. I wasn't raised in a Jewish family, but I was raised in an evangelical Christian family. Extremely evangelical Christian family. And of course, the evangelical ideology, Zionist ideology that's pushed is you need to support Israel because it's part of the end times prophecy. Right? Israel is where God is going to come down from heaven and take up all of the followers of Jesus, the people who believe that Jesus was the Messiah, and leave everybody else to burn on earth. Right? That's literally what evangelical Christians think, but that's the ideology I was taught as a kid. I was told no matter what, you have to unconditionally support Israel because it is part of a biblical end times prophecy. I grew up, started researching the apartheid, started researching what Israel was actually about and how Israel was created and how they had continually expanded by stealing Palestinian land and expelling Palestinian Arabs. And I said, no, this isn't something I can support. In fact, I'm completely against this. I support the Palestinians in their struggle for liberation. I think it's insane that the U.S. is giving Israel $4 billion a year, and Israel's a colonial apartheid state that is acting geopolitically as a neo-colonial outpost for the U.S. in the Middle East that they can use to protect their economic interests, right? That's the only reason the U.S. supports them. It's not because of some end times prophecy. That's just the ideological justification that they give. But anyways, I became pro-Palestine and anti-Zionist, and I talked to my parents about this, evangelical Christians, and they're also not pro-Israel anymore. How could you be? Once you see the reality of what they're doing to Palestinians, how could you support this or say this is something that Jesus Christ or the God would support? It's one of the most ungodly, horrific human rights situations on earth that's enforced by Israel with the U.S.'s funding. So who would want this? Who would support this? Pretty much nobody who knows the reality unless they've completely drank the Kool-Aid of the Zionist ideology. But my point is, all over the world, people in my generation and the younger generation are turning against Israel. They're no longer buying the Zionist propaganda. They're no longer buying this nationalistic, religious extremist ideology, whether the Jewish one or the evangelical Christian one. People aren't buying it, and they're convincing others. They're convincing their family and friends not to buy it. Sometimes even their parents. Sometimes even people in the older generation. So that's got to terrify Israel. It has to. Yeah, public opinion is changing. Most of the world does not support them anymore. Shout out to Adam Friedland, because he's going to catch flack for that. He's going to catch crap from the Zionists and probably even the Israeli lobby and some organized arms of Zionist power who spend a lot of money trying to influence Hollywood and influence entertainment media and news media in general to be more pro-Zionist, be more pro-Israel. They'll probably target Adam Friedland or companies who try and hire Adam Friedland, but solidarity with him for saying that and telling his story on his podcast. And, it's also an example of how new media and social media are destroying the Zionist narrative, right? Because not everybody's turning on MSNBC or Fox News or NBC or CBS every night to watch the news. Older people might still be, and they might still be getting brainwashed, but a lot of younger people are listening to podcasts. And listening to shows like this that give an alternative perspective, and not just an alternative perspective, but a perspective based in reality, a perspective based in truth, which the pro-Israel narratives from the corporate media are completely detached from reality at this point. As are most narratives in support of imperialism and capitalism. They're completely irrational, because if you base your opinions in reality, you can't be pro-imperialist or pro-capitalist and still be a good person. Ross says he doesn't have any dates, unlike our buddy Cade Grenade, who just scored a date with someone who reads Capital. But Ross doesn't want any, LOL. We respect that, Ross. I respect that. You got to focus on you. I'm just really busy with my career right now. That's what I tell every girl who wants to start a relationship. I don't blame you for not wanting any dates. Life is busy. Sometimes maintaining relationships and dating is a hassle. I think I might get back into it at some point soon, but solidarity with your decision not to. Plus, then you don't have to spend money on dates. You know, you don't have to spend money on your significant other, so you can continue to be the sugar daddy of the Midwestern Marx Institute, right? If you got a girlfriend, or if you were out dating all the time, that would give you less time to study Marxism and theory and watch Midwestern Marx, and less money to give to the institute that helps you learn Marxism. So I think you're really making a smart, logical decision here, Ross. Completely unbiased, of course, right? From my perspective. But yeah, I approve. And thank you so much for the 15 euros. Your Oreos. What else we got here? Battle Cossack. Don't give a fish, teach him how to fish. Don't give a man a fish, teach him how to fish. Heard this from a libertarian. His idea is that poor people can start businesses on their own without any help. Well, it's a good saying, not applied to that, because obviously the barrier to entry in any market is extremely high. And even if you do start as a poor person and become rich, you're going to have to do it by exploiting other people. And stepping on other people to get there, because that's how capitalism works. But I do like this parable, or this story, whatever you would call it, in relation to something else I was talking about, where I said that I want to use the TikTok to bring new people into the Institute so that you guys can take classes with Carlos and Danny and Noah. Or you can watch these videos where we talk about theory and break down the news from a systematic Marxist perspective. Or you can read the books that we've published and really learn how to become a more effective organizer, and learn theory, and learn how to dissect corporate media and do geopolitical analysis on your own. Right? Rather than, like, journalists are great, right? The work that people like Richard Medhurst and Max Blumenthal and Ben Norton, the work that they do is fantastic. They report on what's going on in the world so that we can be informed, right? But we want to give people the theoretical tools to deconstruct the corporate media themselves, to understand what's going on in the world themselves, to make a geopolitical analysis themselves. That's the goal of Midwestern Marx. So that's kind of like, rather than giving a man a fish, teaching a man to fish, teaching you guys Lenin's imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, so that you can use it and use that theoretical perspective to understand the world today, and to understand imperialism today, and understand how capitalism has developed since Lenin wrote that in 1917. And if you don't know, I have a full reading guide breaking down Lenin's imperialism, that even if you're not reading the book, if you watch my reading guide, you'll have a basic understanding of the book, because I summarize and break down basically every main point. So yeah, that's our goal at the Institute here. I know Carlos has expressed that many times. I just want to also express that. And there's a story I've told a million times from Kyle Pettis, our labor guy here at the Institute, who keeps us up to date on all the union stuff going on in America. He was told by communists in the Dominican Republic, what Americans need isn't a new communist party, right? You guys have enough parties. What you need is to start educating people in Marxism, educating people in Marxist theory, and helping them understand capitalism, and being able to critique capitalism and explain to other people the contradictions of capitalism, right? And once you educate people on Marxism for 3 years, then they can go into the workplaces, or then they can go to other people and get them to become Marxists too and recruit new people, right? But it's those theoretical tools that are key. They're key to engaging in the class struggle more successfully and making a more astute analysis of the political situation and the geopolitical situation. And once you start educating people about Marxism in the working class, then a vanguard party can emerge, right? Then a party of the most theoretically educated segments of the proletariat, as Lenin says, can emerge and form a political group that can actually threaten political power on behalf of the workers. But it can't happen the other way around, right? You can't put the cart before the horse. You need theoretically educated workers to form the vanguard party before you have the vanguard party come into existence, right? You can't just hope for these theoretically educated workers to pop out of thin air. You have to create them. You have to develop the political consciousness of working class people, which is exactly what we're trying to do here at Midwestern Marx. That is our core goal. Theoretical education, so that in the hands of the working class, theory can become a material force. Why don't you like Zizek? Do you like Nietzsche? I've never really read Nietzsche. Well, I did in college some, but I was like a freshman and I didn't really understand it. But I don't like Zizek because in practice, Zizek falls on the side of the imperialists. He supports NATO's carpet bombing and dismantling of former Yugoslavia. Right? He says that it stopped the genocide, which it absolutely did not. In fact, the NATO bombings increased the amount of ethnic warfare and fighting that was going on in Yugoslavia at the time, and the amount of ethnically motivated killings were increased by NATO's intervention in Yugoslavia. But Zizek supports it. Zizek supported NATO and what they were doing in Ukraine. He, in almost every instance, when it comes to practical reality, he sides with NATO. He sides with the imperialists. And yeah, he does interesting like media or movie analysis, but he's not really a Marxist. He calls himself a Marxist, but he's not. He's essentially a radical liberal. Even in his home country of Slovenia, he was part of an anti-communist organization that helped the U.S. basically do a color revolution, that helped the U.S. basically put in power a more neoliberal party. He was an anti-communist agitator. And now he comes to the U.S., the heart, comes to speak in the U.S., the heart of anti-communism, and now he calls himself a Marxist or a socialist. I don't know if he lives in the U.S., actually, but here's where he's very popular. But his positions are anti-Marxist and anti-socialist through and through, and he kind of comes from the tradition of anti-Marxist, pseudo-Marxist thinkers who have been propped up by the CIA that Gabriel Rockhill talks about in his work extensively, and shows how the Ford Foundation and the Rockefellers and all these capitalistic interests and these capitalist-owned arms of power propped up and funded all these thinkers calling themselves Marxists, like Adorno and Horkheimer, who then in reality would do things like support the Vietnam War or condemn revolutions or working class uprisings in various countries, while calling themselves Marxists and pushing very anti-Marxist theory and anti-Marxist political positions. They tried to make Marxism not about class in some cases and more about identity and all these weird things. So I believe Zizek basically comes from that tradition of pseudo-Marxists calling themselves Marxists that Gabriel Rockhill thoroughly dismantles in his work. Let me see here. He calls it what is he called? The Global Theory Institute. Let's see. We published one of his articles. Actually, we had an interview with Gabriel Rockhill. Carlos did an interview with him where he explained why he made his critique of Zizek, or why he critiqued Zizek in the way that he did, and called him capitalism's court jester. And we also published this article, which is very good, showing how Zizek does commie cosplay while supporting imperialism in practice and siding with the capitalist class and the bourgeoisie in practice. And he shows how theoretically Zizek's not even really a Marxist. He's a sophist who claims to be doing dialectical materialism, but in fact he's not. So, anyways, Rockhill can explain it far better than I can, obviously. So I'm just gonna throw that link in the chat. But if you want to know why I don't like Zizek, this is why. But I've never liked Zizek, right? I studied politics in college for 4 years, studied geopolitics in the world and what's going on in the world. And I came to see there's a huge divide in wealth between the global north and the global south because the Western imperialist powers like the US and Britain have super exploited the global south. And they're continuing to do so to this day through neocolonialism, right? After studying that for 4 years, I read Lenin's Imperialism in parentheses, Black Shirts and Reds. And I was like, wow, it's capitalism that's driving the impoverishment of the global south and poverty worldwide. And Lenin's Imperialism helped me understand the world better than anything that I had read in 4 years of studying politics, right? That's why I liked Marxist theory. That's why I was drawn to Marxist theory, because it helped me understand the world and helped me understand all of the things that I had learned in my undergrad about global politics. Listening to Zizek never helped me understand the world. Zizek's theory never gave me a better understanding of why the U.S. does what they do, or who's actually in control of U.S. politics and actually running the U.S. military machine, which is the capitalist ruling class. Right? Zizek's work never helped me do that. He was just like rambling on about movies or film or whatever. And what else was I going to say? And one of the first videos I saw of Zizek was him saying that people put too much emphasis on neocolonialism, that scholars talk about neocolonialism that much, and it actually isn't that big of a thing in the world, and imperialism isn't that much of a thing anymore. And he also said that Muslim people don't hate the U.S. because the U.S. destroyed Iraq and props up Israel and does all these horrible things in the Muslim world, destroyed the country of Libya. That's not why Muslims hate the U.S. They hate the U.S. because they're jealous of the U.S. and they envy the U.S. and they want to be as powerful and as awesome as us. I was like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Right? No, Muslims largely don't like the U.S. because we've destroyed their countries and massacred their people for oil and other resources. And, you know, imperialism is the stage of capitalism that we exist in today. It's like the number one force driving geopolitics today. Everything that the U.S. does is imperialistic. Everything that they do is to protect their economic and political interests. And they give this facade of saying we're doing this for human rights and democracy, but everyone knows it's bullshit. Everybody knows the corporate lobbyists control Washington and the Pentagon and the State Department, and they do the bidding of giant economic interests who want to super exploit the rest of the world. And countries like, places like Israel, countries like Israel, the U.S. supports and dumps so much money into, even though they're murderous and committing a genocide, because they protect our economic interests. So how can you say that imperialism isn't a big deal, neocolonialism isn't that big of a deal in the world today, when it drives pretty much everything in geopolitics? It relates to geopolitics in some way, at least in every issue pertaining to the U.S., which is most, because the U.S. has 1,000 military bases and has its claws in everything. So basically, I was not, this article by Rockhill and Rockhill's research about Zizek gave me real concrete reasons as to why I could reject Zizek. But before that, I never really liked him, right? I never really thought he was awesome because he didn't help me understand the world. Vladimir Lenin helped me understand the world in a book that was written in 1917, far more than Zizek did with any of his articles that were written in 2020 or whenever, in modern day. All right, that was a random Zizek rant that I didn't expect to go on. Facts, brother. Marxism is rigorous and coherent. I think seeking truth and really trying to figure things out will end up with a Marxist view. Agreed. At least if you're in the working class. If you're in the ruling class, you might just be like the Koch brothers and say, no, I agree with Ayn Rand. People should just be as selfish as possible, and then everything will work out best. And I won't hear any other arguments. I'll just continue to believe that, no matter how untrue it's proven to be time and time again. All right. So what is that? That's cool. I got a little oh, I thought there was, never mind. It's only on my screen. I thought there was a graphic showing how many viewers we had, but it was only showing up on my screen. I'm stupid. Okay, let's talk about the prisoner swaps that are going on, because a lot of hoopla has been made in the media about Israeli prisoners taken by Hamas being returned to their families. But there have also been many Palestinians detained by Israel for years and years who have now been freed and reunited with their families after years of being held illegally, being held without charge or trial in many cases by Israel, which is why Hamas took the hostages in the first place, right? Let's not forget that Israel took thousands of Palestinians prisoner, over 1,000 without charges or without trial, before Hamas did the attack on October 7th and took hostages. So again, we have Hamas doing something in response to the crimes of the Israeli occupation. And the plan for Hamas, as we said from the beginning, was always to do prisoner swaps. It was to get back some of these Palestinians who have been held by Israel for years. So the Western media narrative that Hamas just took hostages for no reason because they're evil and they want to kill Jewish people is false. They took hostages strategically with the hope of trading them with Israel and getting back Palestinians who have been behind bars for years.
Jubilation in the West Bank as Palestinian women and children are freed from military jails, part of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. That is a red truck carrying the prisoners in question. Among them, 17-year-old Iyas Khatib. His father Abed was there to greet him.
My son, he was just studying. He's in the high school. Till now, I'm telling you, I don't know why my son is in jail.
Israel calls these prisoners terrorists. Of those slated for release, some were convicted in Israeli military courts of violent crimes, including attempted murder. Others stand accused of offenses like throwing incendiary devices, throwing stones, or trespassing. But most have not.
Throwing stones is one of the crimes. Throwing stones. So if you go up to the Israeli occupation wall, if you go to the wall surrounding Gaza and keeping the Gazans in like a concentration camp guarded by snipers and Israeli tanks and Israeli artillery, if you throw a rock at them, you're a terrorist and you can be taken to jail. And they won't even give you a trial, right? They won't even have a court rule on this, a biased court. They'll just call you a terrorist and take you to jail. And that's over a quarter of Israel's prisoners live like that. And you hear that dad saying, I don't even know why my son was actually arrested. Maybe he threw a rock. Maybe he threw a rock at the people keeping him in a concentration camp. Is that really a crime?
Not been convicted, and many are teenagers held under what's known as administrative detention. That includes Iyas, with no formal charges or evidence presented against them. In February, IDF soldiers raided his home in the middle of the night, leaving behind a broken door and a family wondering when or if he would be back. Palestinian and international human rights groups say the system of military arrests and detentions lacks basic due process, especially when it comes to children.
Without charges, without trial, without anything, I can't.
I'm surprised that, who is this, NBC? I'm surprised they reported this. I'm surprised they put this together. It's not bad.
Defend myself, for instance, if I have no evidence, if I have no accusation specific.
And this happens regularly to children, to minors.
Yeah.
According to Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, Israel had more than 1,300 people in administrative detention, including 23 children, before October 7th. And Palestinian groups say the number has skyrocketed since then. Palestinians in the occupied territories say these indefinite detentions without trial or evidence are just one of many ways the Israeli military occupation robs them of their basic human rights and dignity. Israeli authorities defend the practice, telling us in a statement.
So when Israeli propagandists and Zionists are saying that, Hamas took hostages, civilian hostages, and they're trading them for terrorists, right? Hamas, or the Palestinians, are trying to get terrorists back versus the Israelis are just trying to get normal civilians back. Well, that's just because Israel labels every single person they arrest without trial as a terrorist. every single person who Israel takes hostage, that's what they are, they're hostages, people kidnapped by the occupying military forces and held behind bars without trial, it's a hostage, right? They just label them terrorists. So then when the Palestinians try and get their sons and daughters and brothers and sisters back, they say, oh, you're trying to get terrorists back because you're all a bunch of terrorists.
Meant that all prisoners are detained according to the provisions of the law. Before their release, they were told if they celebrated publicly or spoke to the press, they would face a fine of more than $18,000.
They were told if they celebrated publicly or spoke to the press, they'd be fined thousands of dollars. These are people in the West Bank or people in Gaza who have nothing, who have no economic opportunities, where unemployment is over 50%. They're going to be fined thousands of dollars if they hug their loved ones after being held in detention for years, or if they speak to the media. I mean, what? That is psychotic. That is fascistic. That is absurd. At a time when Zionist propagandists and the corporate media are posting video after video after video of Israeli hostages taken by the Palestinians, taken by Hamas, reuniting with their families. While they're posting video after video after video of that, they're claiming, or they're telling Palestinians that if they post similar videos of them being reunited with their families, they'll be fined thousands of dollars. These people who have nothing, these people who have no money. They're not allowed to celebrate with their families after Israel took them hostage for years. Was it not enough, Israeli defense forces and Israeli government, to hold these people behind bars for years for no crimes or for throwing a rock? Right? That wasn't enough. Now you have to prevent them from celebrating with their families or for sharing that moment with the world. You people are sick. The way that they not only enforce this apartheid and enforce this occupation and take these people hostage and kill the Palestinians, but the way they then manipulate the media and manipulate the narrative systematically. Not only are we going to hold you hostage, but we're going to fine you if you celebrate your release with your families because it makes us look bad on Twitter. You sick, manipulative bastards.
We met Iyas Khatib the day after he came home. Are you willing to talk to me about your arrest and detention? He refused to talk, afraid Israeli soldiers would retaliate.
And with that, David Noriega joins Top Story tonight from Tel Aviv. David, I know you've really looked into this issue and you have some new reporting about the conditions of Palestinian prisoners inside of Israel.
That's right, Tom. Even before October 7th, the number of people in administrative detention had reached a record, and it's only gone up since then. Even as prisoners are released as part of the ceasefire agreement, more people are getting arrested. Sources in the West Bank told us that 60 people were arrested just in the last 24 hours. What's more, we hear that conditions in the prisons have deteriorated with widespread reports of beatings, food deprivation, and other mistreatment. We put these allegations to the Israeli authorities, and they declined to comment.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated.
Dang, that is on NBC. That's how blatant Israel has gotten in their maltreatment of the Palestinians, that even NBC and corporate media outlets and the journalists who work for them are reporting on Israel's crimes and Israel's apartheid against the Palestinians. And it's hard to deny. A quarter, this is from Haaretz, an Israeli paper, a quarter of Palestinians jailed in Israel are imprisoned without charges or trial. Right? So not only are the courts in Israel extremely biased towards the Zionists and towards the Israeli Defense Forces, as they're called, or they're really Israeli occupation forces, and extremely biased against Arab Palestinians, but a lot of the cases don't even go to court. A lot of the times, the Israelis just label whatever Palestinian they want to throw in jail as a terrorist and haul him off to jail. Right? That's a quarter of the prisoners are held in there without trial. Right? So where was the media when this was going on for years and years and years and years and years? Right? Many of these prisoners held without trial have been in there for years. Where was the media screaming, "Oh my goodness, Israel is taking Palestinian hostages"? Right? When will these Palestinian hostages be released? Think how terrified these Palestinian children must be to be separated from their parents, friends, family, and community and held in an Israeli prison without trial. Think how terrified they must be. There was none of this from the media, almost none. But when Hamas takes Israelis hostage, for a few weeks with the goal of negotiating prisoner swaps, then the media is just crying day after day after day. Look what these evil Arab Palestinians are doing. They're taking people prisoner without trial. How could they? How could they do what Israel has done year after year after year to thousands of people in an effort to try and get their own prisoners back, to try and get their own hostages back? It's just so absurd. It's so absurd. Everything that the Zionist media accuses the Palestinians of doing, every evil or atrocity they accuse them of doing, is something that Israel is doing. It's crazy. All right. Almighty God needs our help to fulfill the prophecy. Yes, right. I mean, that's what Orthodox Jews say, or a lot of people who are Jewish and opposed to the occupation and opposed to Zionism. They say forming an Israeli state is the work of God. It's something that only God can do. And it's an abomination for men to try and push Palestinians off their land and manufacture an Israeli state. Which is like, yeah, if God wants it, why can't God do it himself? Why does God need political extremists and Israeli nationalist terrorist groups to kill and expel the Arabs off their land? Why can't God do it? All right. Not getting a ton of interaction from the chat here, but we have a lot of people. Watching the stream. Hello, everyone. Be sure to like and share the stream. Interacting with the stream in any way, whether commenting in the chat, liking, sharing, helps boost us in the algorithm. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/Midwestern Marx that you can join. $1 patrons or $1 YouTube members, if you're on YouTube, get access to the Midwestern Marx Discord for life. We'll never kick you out. $10 patrons and YouTube members get Carlos's new book, The Purity, Fetish, and the Crisis of Western Marxism. W Palestine, W Midwestern Marx. Absolutely. Same thing with Manifest Destiny and the Spanish Conquest. Just a bunch of BS. Yep. It's all ideology to justify economic expansion and the theft of land with the idea of economic enrichment. Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Wonderful book. I'm listening just at work at the same time. Nice. Getting exploited while learning Marxism. Gotta love it. Thank you, LaCroix. All right. Next story. So there have been many celebrities, as we've covered, who have embarrassed themselves by posting "Pray for Israel," and then it's like a picture of Gaza after it was destroyed by bombs. That's what Justin Bieber posted. Or you had Jamie Lee Curtis who said "Terror from the skies," #Pray for Israel. And it was a picture of some children looking terrified, but it turned out it was Palestinian children who were being bombed by Israel. So there have been many celebrities who embarrassed themselves like that. There have been celebrities like Gal Gadot, who played Wonder Woman and was an actual member of the IDF, lived in Israel, and is a staunch supporter of the Israeli occupation. There have been many celebrities like that supporting Israel. Amy Schumer is another one. Sacha Baron Cohen is another one. Sacha Baron Cohen also lived in Israel. But there have been a few bright spots. There's a good Instagram account called Celebrities for Palestine, and it showed how a lot of even mainstream celebrities have supported Palestine, even if they didn't say it openly, even if they aren't, going to the media and saying, I support Palestine and here's why. There's like a video of Louis Tomlinson, I think his name is, one of the One Direction guys. Somebody brought an Israel flag to his concert and he flipped him off. Just stuff like that. Little stuff. But there have also been people like Susan Sarandon who have gone to rallies for Palestine and vocally spoken out. And Susan Sarandon was dropped by her longtime talent agency, United Talent Agency, for her support of Palestine and for her support of a ceasefire. So this is the point that we've gotten to in Hollywood or in America, where you can't speak out against genocide. You can't even call for a ceasefire without being accused of being anti-Semitic and being hateful and being fired from your job. And this is how capitalism enforces ideological control. Because unless you own capital, the only way that you can make money and survive in this world is by selling your labor to someone who owns capital, right? So if you don't have anybody to sell your labor to, you can't make money, you can't make a wage, and you can't survive. So this is what happens under capitalism. If you speak out, especially if you're in an industry like the entertainment industry, which is tightly ideologically controlled. There's a full CIA board dedicated to controlling and influencing Hollywood. There's rules in Hollywood that you can't use U.S. military equipment unless you let the Pentagon first oversee your scripts, right? Huge, tight ideological control. And when people speak out against that, they get fired. They lose their job. They lose their ability to sell their labor to a capitalist, which is the only way that workers can survive under capitalism, right? So this is how the capitalist system and the structure of the capitalist system helps enforce tight ideological control. You speak out like Susan Sarandon, you get dropped. You can no longer sell your labor. Also, Melissa Barrera, a Mexican-born actress known for the Scream franchises, was dropped by the production company that does Scream because she expressed disgust with the Western media's one-sided narrative about Israel's genocide in Gaza. And Jenny Ortega also ended up leaving Scream, which many people speculated was in solidarity with Melissa Barrera. We don't know that for sure yet. But Ortega has been an outspoken critic of Western imperialism. So there are a few celebrities with a backbone, right? But it comes at a price. It comes at a price. The Red Scare, McCarthyism never ended, right? People are still being pushed out of Hollywood and pushed out of their jobs because of their opinions, because of standing up against empire. And free speech warriors, people like Ben Shapiro, who claim to stand for free speech first and foremost, have been cheering it on. They've been saying, yes, there needs to be more censorship on university campuses. It's hilarious. It's like, do you people not realize how hypocritical you're being? You built your whole career, Ben Shapiro, on saying there should be no censorship on college campuses and there shouldn't be a safe space for ideas. And now you're calling for people who support Palestine to be expelled or to be fired. It's like, how? How do you not realize the hypocrisy there? These people are so stupid. They're so blind by Zionist ideology and propaganda. But this is a letter signed by artists who were not blinded by propaganda and Zionism calling for a ceasefire. It's a letter to President Biden talking about what Israel is doing and how it needs to end, signed by people like Jordan Peele, Jon Stewart, John Cusack, Jody Balfour, Joaquin Phoenix. Lots of big names signed this. So solidarity with all these people because they are putting their career at risk, right? More popular actors like maybe Mark Ruffalo or how do you say Joaquin Phoenix's name? I don't know. Joaquin Phoenix or even like Macklemore. They're more popular. Lupita Nyong'o. So they might be shielded from some of the effects of standing up for Palestine. Whereas other lesser known actors and actresses are just dropped by the Hollywood machine, dropped by their talent agencies. But still, they're still taking risk by doing this, right? And they could get attacked by the media or could get attacked by Zionist organizations who, like I said, have huge control in Hollywood for doing this. So it's a risk. Solidarity with them. Jennifer Lopez is one of them. It's pretty impressive that... it's pretty cool that so many celebrities chose to speak out against the mainstream narrative and speak out against genocide at a time when it's increasingly important to speak out against genocide. On the other end of the spectrum, we had the cowards. We had the Zionist celebrities like Gal Gadot and Eve Barlow, as well as the celebrities who just want to go along with the mainstream U.S. imperialist narrative and just want to go along with Hollywood and what the mainstream is telling them to do. And 700 of those people, those celebrities, signed a letter condemning Hamas, calling it terrorism, calling them evil, and supporting Israel. So this is Gal Gadot, played Wonder Woman, was a member of the Israeli Defense Forces for a while and lived in Israel. Just look at these guys. Look at this freaking hipster. This guy should not be allowed to support genocide. We should send this guy to Gaza. Imagine this guy going without food and water for a day. He'd be in shambles. That's what the people of Gaza deal with every day. But anyways, moving on from weird hipster-looking celebrities. There were 700 celebrities who signed this. Amy Schumer, who has been just unhinged in her support for Israel, almost unbelievably so. Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker, Howie Mandel, Bella Thorne. So really disappointing to see this from these celebrities, and they'll face no backlash, right? None of these celebrities will be dropped from their talent agency for supporting Israel. None of these celebrities will have their careers or their financial well-being threatened for supporting Israel. In fact, they'll get a pat on the back, right? They might get more career opportunities for this, which is why, yes, some of these celebrities are actually Zionists. Some of them have actually drank the Zionist Kool-Aid and made Israel a huge point for them, like Gal Gadot, who lived in Israel. But a lot of them are probably just going along with this because this is what the mainstream narrative is right now. They know that this position, signing this letter, won't rock the boat, right? It'll honestly get them a pat on the back from the establishment. So it could be more of a career move than anything, which is almost more disgusting, right? I'd almost rather have you be like Gal Gadot and openly stand up for Israel rather than just supporting Israel because you think it's going to help your career. But Gal Gadot also created a movie, a propaganda movie for Israel, and organized a short screening of it in Hollywood, where she would show people this movie demonizing Hamas, demonizing the Palestinians, portraying Israel as the victims, and encouraging people to support Israel. And obviously, she was criticized for this by activists and people who are pro-Palestine. Why would you spend all this effort and energy making a propaganda film for Israel while they're actively genociding Palestinians in a week or in 5 weeks, where they've killed 4,000 Palestinian children and over 11,000 people? Why are you spending your energy, time, resources, and platform as a celebrity supporting Israel and propagandizing people to support Israel when they're committing these horrific crimes? That was the criticism, but luckily, there are reports that not a lot of people showed up. Okay, this was one report that said empty seats and no Hollywood stars at Gal Gadot's IDF propaganda film screening, possibly because of the outburst from Palestinian activists and because of the criticism that Gal Gadot got. No big-time celebrities showed up to her screening of IDF propaganda. Maybe they were scared of catching backlash themselves. As I said before, a lot of these celebrities and their agents are just, cold, calculating monsters trying to decide whatever's best for their brand, whatever is going to get people to like them more, and whatever is going to keep them popular is what they're going to say and what they're going to do. So it could be that a lot of them made a judgment like that and decided they didn't want to show up, but it was an extremely disappointing screening. And Eve Barlow, another Zionist celebrity, at this point, I don't know if Eve Barlow is even an actress or a celebrity. She's basically just a mouthpiece for the Israeli apartheid state. She's might as well be considered like the press secretary for Israel. But she said, last night at the Museum of Tolerance, Hollywood was supposed to gather to watch the footage from October 7th. That's hilarious. At the Museum of Tolerance is where they were going to gather and support Israel. Not a single celebrity showed up. F their ribbons and their marches and their signatures. There is no fortitude in Hollywood. They are all a bunch of cowards. So Eve Barlow is very mad that nobody showed up to Gal Gadot's propaganda screening. And she is accusing them of doing it because they probably wanted to protect their image, it seems like, right? They're down to sign a signature, or they're down to sign a letter with 700 other celebrities supporting Israel. But when it comes to showing up to a very controversial screening of a propaganda movie where there's going to be people protesting outside probably, and where they're going to get criticism on Twitter, they're not down for that, right? It shows how tepid these people's positions actually are, and how they're just using politics and using the recent political events to try and protect their brand or grow their brand. A lot of the ones who support Israel anyways. Like, do you think Justin Bieber really has deep thoughts about the Israeli state and the Israeli-Palestine conflict? Or do you think he just posted "Pray for Israel" on his story because he thought it would get him some pats on the back? He thought everyone would be like, yes, pray for Israel. You're so kind, Justin. Israel suffered a horrible terrorist attack. Pray for them. And then he was hit with the backlash of, no, dumbass, you just posted a picture of Gaza, the Palestinian territory destroyed by Israel's carpet bombs, and said, pray for Israel over it. So his ploy backfired. But my point being that it was just a way to grow his brand, right? There was a way to try and make him appear as sympathetic and engaged in geopolitical events, and someone who cares about things going on in the world. It's not like he actually had deep feelings, deep opinions about the conflict, which is why it's so funny that Justin Bieber's post backfired in the way that it did. And there were many viral videos, including one of mine, exposing him for his lie, or exposing him for his mistake, I should say. What else do we got here? Oh, this is important to cover. Yeah, let's cover this. I got a couple. Okay. Anti-apartheid is anti-Semitic. Yes, absolutely. In the minds of Zionist propagandists. Okay, so recently there were reports that anti-Arab, Islamophobic, anti-Muslim hate crimes have been increasing. 3 Palestinian students, these 3 were recently shot by a 48-year-old man. They were all wearing 2 of them were wearing these scarves, which are, how do you pronounce them? Kifaya? The kifaya scarves that are Palestinian, and are people wearing them generally wear them in solidarity with Palestine. 3 of them were shot. Tragically, there was a young Palestinian boy recently who was stabbed to death by his landlord. We also covered that here at Midwestern Marx. Tragic event in what appears to be an anti-Muslim hate crime. And then we had Stuart Seldowitz, former Obama staffer, former George Bush staffer,
would be a good
man who has worked in the highest positions of government, was caught going on an anti-Muslim Islamophobic rant against a halal vendor in New York. And he was arrested for this. It was a hate crime. So he's now been arrested. But this is just one of many hate crimes against Palestinians or against Arabs or against Muslim people in general that have happened in the U.S. as all of this anti-Muslim Islamophobic propaganda is coming from the media, is coming from the mainstream. We're being beat over the head with anti-Muslim propaganda right now, which always leads to a spike in hate crimes here in America. Every time the American media and the American political establishment, the American ruling class, is demonizing one of their enemy countries, there is an increase in hate crimes against people from those countries living in America, or people associated with those countries and their religion living in America. Or if not every time, oftentimes. This has happened many times. So during the War on Terror, there was a well-studied spike in anti-Muslim hate crimes and Islamophobic hate crimes, as the U.S. media was demonizing Muslims and saying we needed to fight this war against radical jihadist terrorism, even though it's been the U.S. and the CIA who has propped up jihadist terrorism around the world when it's been convenient to our interests. We did it in Libya. We did it in Afghanistan. We did it with Syria. We funneled arms and guns into the jihadist groups in order to keep them alive. And then we say that we need to be there to fight terrorism. It's completely hypocritical. But either way, when the War on Terror began and all this propaganda started being spewed, there was an increase in anti-Muslim hate crimes here in the United States. There were people who bought into the propaganda so much that they thought they needed to go out and kill or go out and harass their Muslim neighbors, Muslim people living here in the United States. And of course, you know, part of this happened because of 9/11. Part of this happened because of the terrorist attacks. But you can't discount, just like you can't discount 9/11, you can't discount the propaganda that turned 9/11 into a talking point to justify war, right? So was it really 9/11 that convinced people to commit anti-Muslim hate crimes? Or was it the propaganda trying to associate all Muslim people and Muslim majority countries with 9/11 and portray these people as our enemy and use 9/11 to justify 2 murderous wars in Iraq and Afghanistan? So it wasn't just 9/11 that spiked the anti-Muslim hate crimes in America. It was the way that 9/11 was portrayed by our media as well. Additionally, in recent times, as the so-called new Cold War with China has been ramping up, and as our media is just doing anti-China propaganda around the clock, and as our politicians, including the ruling administration, the Biden administration, are doing anti-China propaganda around the clock, anti-Asian hate crimes in the U.S. have increased 339%. Right? So more people in America have been committing hate crimes against Asian people as our media has been nonstop demonizing Asian people, and in particular China, because they're building an alternative economic system to capitalism, because they're kicking the U.S.'s ass economically, and they're doing it with socialism and central planning. So the U.S. is trying to demonize them, trying to justify potential regime change in China, overthrowing and destabilizing their government. And in the process of demonization, a lot of Americans are committing hate crimes against Chinese Americans or against Asian Americans, right? The same way that the war on terror spurred hate crimes against Muslim Americans. So this is a pattern, right? What's going on right now, where all of these Americans are killing Palestinians, Palestinian Americans who have nothing to do with Hamas. This is happening as our media is doing anti-Palestinian propaganda, right? It happened when our country was when our media was doing anti-Muslim propaganda to justify the war, or the so-called war on terror, the Iraq War. And this is, of course, the anti-Palestinian propaganda they're doing is to justify Israel and Israel's crimes. And when they do anti-China propaganda to justify the U.S.'s crimes and economic sanctions against China and regime change efforts in China, anti-Asian hate crimes increase. So are you seeing a pattern here? Do you think there's no correlation between the insane imperialistic U.S. propaganda and hate crimes increasing at home? No, of course there's a correlation. Of course there is. You'd have to be stupid to say there's not. When people like Stuart Seldowitz, who's held one of the highest positions in U.S. government, gets caught on camera repeatedly harassing a Muslim American and calling him a terrorist for not supporting Israel, right? That guy was in one of the highest places of government in the United States. That's the kind of person running our country. And he's just walking up to a random street vendor who happens to be brown and happens to be Muslim and calling him a terrorist. Of course, that's going to trickle down. When the people running our country are pushing this ideology on us, this xenophobic ideology on us via the media, and via anything, mostly via the media, though. Of course, that's going to trickle down and have an effect on the population. He got bored of harassing Russians. Yeah, he was doing that earlier too. Okay, I have one more story that I have to get through here because this is very important. So there have been many reports about the bombing and the raiding of Al-Shifa Hospital, right, which is a hospital in Gaza that's been taking care of Palestinians as they've been carpet bombed by the Israelis. And they've been cut off from electricity. There was a video that came out of doctors performing surgery while using their phone flashlights as lights because the electricity has been cut off by Israel. They're struggling to get medical supplies because of the Israeli blockade, which is always a thing. But it's more of a thing now because the hospitals are flooded with people who have been injured by Israeli bombs. And while all of that's going on, and while Israel has bombed and raided the hospital, they've also arrested the hospital's administrators and directors. They've arrested and dragged to jail the people who are in charge of the hospital, which, as we were just covering in a previous story, Israel detained, or a quarter of the Palestinians that they've detained, they do so without trial, or they do so without charges. All they have to do is say that you're terrorists. or you're helping the terrorists, and then they can arrest you and they can haul you off. So this is Dr. Mohammed Abu Salmaya. He's 45 years old, the director of the hospital. Right now, he's sitting in an Israeli prison with no charge, at a time when Palestinians need his help, at a time when, thousands and thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands, absolutely tens of thousands of Palestinians are injured or have been buried under rubble, and the hospitals are overflowing. At that time, Israel is raiding hospitals and arresting hospital directors, right? So Al-Shifa is Gaza's largest hospital. It was directly raided by Israeli forces. This is after they had been hit by Israeli bombs and hit by Israeli artillery, which Israel has, of course, justified by saying there's Hamas tunnels under the hospital, or the hospital was storing Hamas. Hamas was using this hospital as a base of operations, so we had to bomb it. And now they've raided it and arrested the hospital's directors, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But here is proof that Al-Shifa Hospital was being bombed. But of course, look at how the Wall Street Journal reports it. Look at how the Jeff Bezos-owned Wall Street Journal, no, that's Washington Post, never mind. But look at how the corporate media outlet that is the Wall Street Journal reports this. Explosions at Gaza Hospital as Israeli forces close in. At least one explosion struck Gaza's Al-Shifa Hospital. Explosion? An explosion? You mean an Israeli missile? All right. What causes an explosion? It's missiles, right? And who's firing missiles at Gaza right now? It's Israel, right? So it's not an explosion that struck Al-Shifa Hospital. It's a bomb. It's a missile. It's an artillery shell, right? But either way, after bombing the hospital, Israel raided the hospital, arrested the hospital's directors, the people in charge of it. And I have to wonder, what is Israel doing with these people? What is Israel doing? What is the IDF doing with these hospital administrators and hospital directors and doctors who are being held in Israeli prisons? Because we know Israel has a long history. Mossad and the Israeli Defense Forces, Mossad is Israeli intelligence. They're basically their version of the CIA. They have a long history of torturing Palestinians while they're in detention, which is what they accuse the Palestinians of doing, because all of their accusations against Palestine are projection, like I said earlier. But they have a systematic system. They have a systematic method of torture that they enforce against Palestinians who are in Israeli detention by depriving them of basic things that humans need, keeping them in solitary confinement, stuff like that. Here's the United Nations on the history of Israeli torture dating all the way back to the 1970s. And here's another scholarly source on the history of torture in Israel. It's well documented that the IDF, Mossad, and Israeli government have this system of torture. So what are they doing with these doctors who they've stolen from Al-Shifa Hospital? Are they torturing them? Right? And the criticism of torture as a method and torture as a practice that have been made by even Republican folks like John McCain, who was subjected to torture at one point in his career, I believe, is that by torture doesn't actually work, right? Torture doesn't actually get prisoners to admit the truth. You can extract any kind of confession you want out of someone with torture. And this is what the United States did when they were trying to justify the Iraq War. They would take people from Iraq or Pakistan or whatever surrounding areas, torture them, waterboard them, and say, tell us that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Right? Tell us that he has weapons of mass destruction and we'll stop torturing you. So eventually that's what some of them did. They said, sure, stop torturing me. Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. It wasn't true, right? But that was the confession that the U.S. wanted to extract, that U.S. intelligence wanted to get through torture. So they would have justification for overthrowing the Iraqi government. So my fear, my worry is that the Israeli Defense Forces and Mossad are arresting these doctors, arresting these Al-Shifa Hospital directors, so they can torture them and extract the confession that they want. So they can extract a confession saying, yes, we were working with Hamas. Yes, Hamas had a base of operations underneath the hospital. Yes, we were hiding Hamas tunnels. Yes, Israel was justified in bombing us because Hamas was here. That is my fear. Either way, whether these doctors and hospital directors and administrators are being tortured or not, it's absurd for Israel to be bombing and raiding hospitals at a time where they're carpet bombing Gaza and the Palestinians need medical care more than ever. This is just sick, and it shows the nature of the Israel-Hamas war, which is really just Israel enforcing collective punishment on the Palestinians because they broke out of the concentration camp that is Gaza. And solidarity with these doctors. These are the most heroic people on the planet right now. The people fighting for the Palestinians and putting their lives on the line to do so. People will confess to anything. Yeah, if you torture them, if you waterboard them and tell them to confess. Explosion? Who did it? It couldn't be an Israeli bomb. No, it was an explosion. It came from underground. What's up, Jenny Lynn? How's it going? What's the Discord? Discord is an app where you can communicate, and we have a big Midwestern Marx group chat, basically. Excuse me. So a bunch of Midwestern Marx people are in the Discord. We use the Discord to teach people about theory and whatnot. It's good. Eddie, Piano Man asked a good question. Oh, man, I'm broke. Okay, let me find it. Hold up. Hold up. I got you. You get this one for free, Piano Man. What's the Discord? I agree the wealth divide is a problem, but so do all liberals. What makes someone socialist? Yes, what liberals will do is acknowledge, a lot of times what liberals will do is acknowledge the problems that exist in the world today, but they'll condemn and not support the solutions to those problems, right? And sometimes they'll say, like, we need to tax the rich more, right? If we tax the rich a little bit more and do more social programs for the poor, that'll fix the wealth divide. That'll never fix the wealth divide, and that's the only way that the poor ever win concessions from the rich is through class struggle, through organizing and saying you have to give us health care, right? Or you have to allow us to form unions. But the rich are always trying to do the opposite. The rich, the capitalists, are always struggling in the opposite direction, lobbying the government to cut Medicare and Medicaid and cut benefits for the workers and crush the workers' unions, which they absolutely have throughout the last 40 to 70, 80 years, really. After the Great Depression, there were huge gains that were made for workers. And after World War II, there were more wildcat strikes throughout America than any other time in the country's history. And a lot of good policies were signed into law for workers that have since been repealed by 40 years of neoliberalism, which started with Ronald Reagan, or even earlier than that. So as Marxists, we see society as a product of class struggles, right? A product of the struggle between the working class and the capitalist class that I just explained. And that struggle goes back and forth, right? But until you have the working class seize political power, until you have them fully take control of the state, the politics from the capitalist class who currently controls it, these problems will persist and the problems of capitalism will persist. And ultimately, what the workers need to do is gain control of the means of production, the tools, the factories, the sources of economic power in this country, which are currently all owned by the capitalists. So the rest of us are forced to sell our labor to the capitalists in order to survive. And they use our labor to just enrich themselves more and control more and more of the means of production. Right? So this is how the system's set up. And this is how the system is based at its core. The relations of production in this society are between wage laborers, for the most part, wage laborers who don't own capital. And so they have to sell their labor in order to get a wage from a capitalist, and capitalists who own the means of production, who own tools, right? And you can tax those capitalists a little more. You can take a little bit of their surplus value and use it to pay for healthcare for the workers or whatever, and that's a good thing. But ultimately, that doesn't fix the problem at the core of the system, right? And the system also, as Karl Marx lays out in Capital Volume 1, has a tendency towards accumulation and concentration. As capitalism develops, the capitalists accumulate more and more and more wealth and more of that wealth is concentrated into fewer and fewer and fewer hands until most of the economy is dominated by monopolies owned by a few shareholders or shareholding groups like BlackRock and Vanguard, as well as the big banks, which is what we have now. And we've had that for a while. But so what socialists want is to get political power for the working masses from the capitalists, end all corporate lobbying, and end all control of the government by corporations, which, even Princeton, even mainstream studies have said the U.S. is an oligarchy, not a democracy. 93% of our elections are decided by the candidate who raises the most money. Most of our bills and laws are literally written by lobbyist groups that represent big corporations, right? It's an oligarchy. It's controlled by corporations. What socialists want to do is seize the government from those corporations and then transition the means of production into the hands of the workers, create a new economic system where land and resources and tools are owned by the workers or are used to benefit the workers, not used to appropriate surplus value, not used by the capitalists to accumulate more and more and more wealth, which they can do by exploiting their workers and driving down the cost of labor as much as possible. Liberals just want to tweak the system, right? They want to keep the system the same at its core so that the majority of workers have to continually sell their labor to capitalists in order to survive. And the capitalists continue to own the means of production. But we're going to tax them a little more, and we're going to have healthcare for the workers, right? We're going to tax them a little more, and we're going to use it to fund public education. But what they fail to realize is, one, that unless you change the system at its core, the capitalists who have accumulated all the wealth are always going to control the state. They're always going to control the government. They're always going to use their wealth to control the information supply, and control the government and the policies that they make until the workers get organized and actively prevent them from doing so, and actively stop them and actively create a political revolution of sorts. They're always going to do that. And yeah, I guess that's what liberals fail to realize, that unless you take the means of production from the capitalists, unless you take giant industries like oil and nationalize them, make them publicly owned so that they're owned by the masses rather than being owned by private shareholders, the system's always going to do the things that liberals don't like, right? Because they don't see society as a product of class struggles, which is what it actually is. Eddie, I don't say this lightly. As a speaker, you're Fred Hampton tier. Well, I don't know about that, Tom. Thank you so much. I've never heard such a nice compliment in all my life. I just went on a giant ramble about why socialism over liberalism, and I felt like I was rambling and not being as coherent as I wanted to be. And then here comes Tom to tell me I'm Fred Hampton tier. So just really building up my ego and building up my confidence there, Tom. But thank you so much. What a kind thing to say. Fred Hampton is, of course, one of my heroes. I was thinking about that yesterday. I was messaging a buddy about Fred Hampton. And yeah, just thinking about what he did and how much he organized by the age of 20 or 21 when he was killed, and how much he could have done if the CIA or the Chicago police didn't kill him. You have a very deep understanding, Eddie. Do you guys at Midwestern Marx ever think of posting in other languages? I've seen some videos on AI that will auto-translate. Thank you, Red Maze. That's very kind. I'm glad to hear you say that. I've gained that, what you call a deep understanding, which is an understanding I want to be even deeper. I want to deepen my understanding of the world and the capitalist mode of production and different conflicts created by the capitalist mode of production, like this one, the Israel-Palestine conflict. I want to deepen that understanding. So I'm not where I want to be, but I appreciate you saying that I have a deep understanding. And to the extent that I do, I've gained it through reading Capital, reading philosophy, reading books from great scholars like Norman Finkelstein, who are willing to set the historical record straight, as the Zionists and imperialists are constantly trying to mess with the historical record. But yes, we do talk about posting in other languages. We posted some videos in Spanish. We've gone on Diego Rusarin's show, which is mostly a Spanish-speaking show. So I know we have a lot of audience members who are bilingual. Duolingo. We've also been experimenting with AI too. We're trying to get an AI software that can cut clips for us, that can cut shorts for us, that can edit videos for us and take out filler words and stuff like that. So we are experimenting with AI, and we are trying to get our videos translated. So will we start using AI to translate our videos in the future? Possibly. It's something we're looking into. It's something we want to do. We want to reach out to people in other languages, but we'll see. We'll see how plausible it is, because obviously we're very limited in our resources. But thank you for the $10 super chat, because that'll help. That's more resources. So I had something else to say. I cannot remember what it was, though. AI videos just sometimes turn out kind of clunky. All right, like there's an AI software that could turn all of our articles on MidwesternMarx.com into videos, right? But it's like the robot voice. It is like an AI voice that talks like this. And I don't know. Some people just think it's cheap and don't like it. I thought it was cool because it condensed all these scholarly, well-written articles into video format for people to just listen to. But whatever. Maybe we'll bring it back in the future. Piano Man, I thought you didn't have any money, Piano Man. Thank you so much for the $10 super chat, though. I appreciate you quite much. I do really like what a lot of socialists say, but I don't think I know enough to be confidently on board. Can I hop on to Poke and Prod? Absolutely, please do. We would love to have you. That's the point of this channel, right? And we don't want to hide anything. As Che Guevara said, who's on my clock up there, he said, it's not my fault that reality is Marxist, right? But we believe that the truth is on our side, right? As Marxists, we don't hide from facts. We don't run from facts. We engage with the facts. And if the facts lead us to change our theories and change our understanding of the world, then that's what we do, right? It's facts before feelings, facts before theory. That's the dialectical materialist method of engaging with the world. You engage with the world and you form your theory based on the material reality. So we believe that the truth is on our side as socialists and Marxists. So ask away, critique away, talk to me, talk to people in the audience. We're happy to respond to any questions and engage in any kind of conversation, because we believe that will only make you more Marxist. That will only make you more socialist. The more that you study the world and come to understand history and come to understand the dialectical materialist method, which sees society as a product of class struggle and is constantly engaged in a class struggle. We MidwesternMarx.com I would check out. We've got tons of articles, and we've published multiple books all talking about socialism and Marxism, as well as a lot of long book reviews breaking down core Marxist texts, core works of Marxist theory, socialist theory. I've got reading guides for Vladimir Lenin's State and Revolution, Vladimir Lenin's Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, and a partial reading guide for Friedrich Engels' Origins of the Family, Private Property, and the State that I want to finish, as well as, over 1,000 other videos on YouTube that can help teach you about socialism and Marxism. I would just say dive in, help yourself. If anything doesn't sound right, question it. I've made mistakes in the past too and said stuff that's wrong or changed my mind about stuff. But for the most part, I think if you dive into the Midwestern Marx content, you'll come away more socialist rather than less socialist. But that's my rant on that. Space is communist. True. We did an article about space communism. Or space capitalism, at least. It was a long time ago. It was like one of the first articles we published. Space and capitalism was basically about how capital would expand to space theoretically if humans start populating space and engaging in mining and other economic activity in space before socialism. It's an analysis of what that would look like. It's pretty interesting because Lenin talks about how once capitalism has conquered the home country, and once capital monopolizes and concentrates at the top, those capitalists in countries like America or in Great Britain go abroad. They go to other countries to try and super exploit them so they can accumulate more. And this is basically saying that once capitalists have conquered Earth, they'll go to space so they can accumulate more. Pretty interesting. But anyways, I've got to head out now, y'all. I've got practice in less than 40 minutes. Thank you so much for all the super chats. Thank you so much for everybody who hung out today. It was a lot of fun. Be sure to subscribe, turn notifications on, patreon.com/Midwestern Marx, blah, blah, blah. Follow us everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Rumble, all of them. Unless you don't want to. You don't have to. I'd never pressure you. But you do have to follow us on all of them or I hate you. All right. Enough rambling for today, folks. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm going to go pee and then kick some people's butt at wrestling practice. I hope you have a great rest of your week.
About a radical redistribution of political and economic power.